Welcome back to another episode of Consciously Clueless, the podcast that teaches you how to live a healthier lifestyle that makes you and the planet happier. The world is changing quickly. Sometimes it feels like you can't keep up. I hear you. You want to make the world a better place, you care, but you don't know where to start. You know taking care of yourself is important, but how? I get it. I have a history of diving into a new endeavor seeking perfection and quickly feeling like I failed. Whether it was going vegan or learning how to recycle more, I wish I had guidance to keep me on track and not overwhelmed. I can't lie, the world needs your help. But it doesn't need you to be perfect. This podcast is here to help. Here we go. Today I talk with Mitali Deypurkaystha, the vegan publisher. Here we go. You had to put yourself on a spectrum from clueless to conscious. What would that look like for you? Where do you feel today, whatever that means for you?
I love this question. I would say I am consciously clueless right now.
That's perfect that you're on the podcast.
Yeah, I am consciously clueless. I mean, I think it's something that's, without getting too deep straight away, Carly, let's just get to know each other, but I don't go too deep straight away. But yeah, I think one of the biggest sort of defining things in my life is being okay with not knowing and understanding that you're never going to know everything about everything there is to know about everything on this planet. You're going to die well before you get anywhere close to knowing that and being okay with it and seeing it as a good thing.
Right.
So yeah, I think as a publisher, I do this with my clients where they worry about they're in the middle of writing a book. And some of these people that I'm working with are such experts, Carly, like really amazing people.
Top of the game.
You really are. And yes, at some point in the process of helping them plan and write their books, they will get the dreaded imposter syndrome. They've met somebody who knows more about them on this particular subject, or has been around for longer than them, or has more qualifications than them, or whatever arbitrary thing that they're using to bash themselves over the heads with, basically.
Right.
And I'd have to coach them through that. And one of the key tools I use is this idea of being consciously clueless and knowing that you're never going to know everything there is to know about everything on your subject. Literally, there's always going to be somebody else who knows more than you, and being okay with that, but understanding that the expertise you do have, there's a ton of people who don't even have that. So It's your duty to pass that, what you do know, onto other people, instead of worrying about this magical, mythical time when you're going to know everything there is to know about everything. That's never going to happen. And then you're never going to give back to anybody, which is a terrible way to live, really, if you think about it.
Right.
Gosh, that got deep very quickly, didn't it?
I'm so here for it. That is perfect. And I love that because it's one of those situations where when we take ourselves out of the equation, we're like, yeah, nobody knows everything. But then you get this expectation on yourself, like you're the one suddenly who's going to do that. And I don't expect that of other people.
No, but you do it for yourself. And so if I just get to that, if I get that qualification, if I just get to that level of expertise, or if I've just been around, if I get to the 10th year and I've been in this for 10 years, then I'm good enough. And so who's telling you those things? You are. Nobody else is measuring you on those things.
So let's get into, you mentioned that you are a publisher. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into that world?
Oh gosh, we haven't a whole day to talk about this. I'll give you the abridged version. So I'm a former journalist. I've always loved writing. That was in the blood. Ever since I was a kid, I'd loved writing and got into journalism. Then I moved into copywriting and content writing for a number of businesses around the world. And then a client of mine asked me to write a book. And I thought, what the hell? I've never written a book before. Why are you asking me to write a book? And he said, I could hire a ghostwriter, but then I'll have to spend ages getting them to understand my brand and the way that I speak. And you've been my copywriter for 2 years. I'd rather you do it. So he gave me a bunch of money that I couldn't say no to, didn't give me a deadline, said, you take as long as you want. So I'm thinking, oh my God, this is amazing.
Does this guy have a friend with another business that needs help?
I know, exactly. I was like, so you give me a load of money and you don't even give me a deadline. I'm so happy.
Right.
9 months later, I'm about to kill myself because it's that painful writing this book. No one's explained to me how to do it. I got into writing a book in the same way most people write their first book, which is you think you write your book in the way that you read it from beginning to end.
Yep.
That's, by the way, the worst way to write a book.
Yep.
But I didn't know that. So I got overwhelmed. I forgot what I'd already written. So that I was now repeating myself. Sometimes I was referring to things that I didn't put in the book, so it doesn't make sense. New ideas have come in, but now it doesn't fit with what I've already written. So I now need to rewrite a bunch of stuff to make that thing now fit in. It's just so overwhelming. And the only reason I carried on was because I'd spent all of his money. I couldn't give him a refund. So I was stuck. I know, I was stuck writing this goddamn book. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't sensible. I wanted to spend all of this money and had a great time spending it. And I didn't do the sensible thing and put it into a savings account.
I love your honesty so much.
It's so true. And it's really strange now looking back and realizing, thank God I wasn't sensible, because I wouldn't be doing what I do now if I was able to give him a refund. So a real sort of sliding doors moment in my life there. But I had to carry on. Another 9 months. It took me 18 painful months to write this book. Finally did it. The book became a bestseller. So he then went and told a bunch of people. I'm thinking, oh, great. Now I've got more books to write. So then I ended up writing 7 books as a ghostwriter. But the difference was the first one took me 18 painful months.
Right.
The 7th one took me 5 weeks to plan and write.
Damn.
And that's when I thought, okay, I've done something so often that I've unwittingly created a structure or a formula. Why don't I just show people this formula? And then they can go and write their own books, because there's only so many books I'm willing to write.
Because you're like, I'm tired. I can't write y'all's book forever.
Exactly. And there's only even at top speed, I probably will only want to write 10 or 11 in a year. I probably wouldn't even want to do that, to be honest.
Right.
But if I can show people how to do it themselves, I can help hundreds, thousands of people write books. So that's how I came into helping people write books. And then publishing, when I became an author, I went through torture all over again. So this time, a different kind of torture. The first type of torture was when I wrote my first book as a ghostwriter, no structure. By the time I wrote my own book as an author, I did it in about 3 weeks. Great. Then I thought, okay, the next bit is editing, design, etc., etc. As a ghostwriter, I never saw any of that because it's not my job. You hand over your manuscript, you get paid, you run off to the sunset like I normally did, booked a nice holiday on some tropical island somewhere, went and had a load of mojitos. And I didn't see what happened after that. The next thing I knew was several months later, I'd get a message from my client saying, hey, the book's come out and I'll see it on Amazon or I'll see it in a bookstore. I didn't see the process.
Right.
So I just thought, we just hand it over to an editor and a designer. Oh, hell no. You have to manage these people. It's like having another job or another business for about 6 to 12 months.
Right.
And I had a terrible editor the first time around who completely messed up my book because I didn't know what a good editor was. This person had loads of great reviews, had a flashy website. I thought, okay, now I know what it takes to be a good editor. It's not a flashy website and loads of your friends just leaving you reviews. So I went through that hell. I went through a second round of hell becoming an author. So my goal as a publisher is to take all that away from people. Right. You know, give them a structure so they can write a book and then manage the whole editing, design, formatting process so they don't have to. So that's how I got into it. I tried to give you a short version there.
That was great. That was great. I love that. What you're doing, it seems, is giving people the ability to share their message without getting lost in it, right? Because how many people give up writing a book?
Exactly. And this, I mean, I was just speaking to a gentleman just literally half an hour ago, and he's now going to be writing a book from January onwards. So he's writing a book in 2024 with me. And one of the key reasons he wanted to work with me is a message that I put out all over my social media, which is, the sad thing is, it's the egotistical people in this world that have the loudest voice because they're so driven by their ego. They will get their voice out there in terms of books, in terms of keynote speaking, etc., etc. Yep. But the people we really need to hear from, vegans, plant-based businesses, ethical business owners, sustainability practitioners, environmentalists, B Corp founders, these are the people, social entrepreneurs, these are the people we really need to hear from. Yep. But they're so busy, focused on doing good. And then they think about writing a book to get more visibility on their message and their mission. But then they're hampered by things like no structure, no understanding of what it takes to be a good editor, good designer. And then they give up. So the voices we need to hear
Yeah.
we don't hear, and we hear the egotistical voices. And my goal is to shine light on the people we need to be listening to, as opposed to the ones I'm talking about. People like Gary Vayner. I'm sure they're lovely people, but I don't really need to hear their voices again and again, to be honest. I'm tired of what they
I first of all, your energy is beautiful, and I love your ability to be like, yeah, these are the facts. This is what we're doing here, folks. So I just what a refreshing energy. But I love what you're saying, because it's similar to why I want to coach people in living more consciously. Because how many people do we know want to go vegan or live more sustainably, but then they Google it and it's shit, that's overwhelming.
Yeah.
This person's telling me this person's telling me to go raw vegan. This person's telling me to live zero waste and I can only fit all my trash in a jar. Everyone's screw that. I'm just going to do nothing.
Yeah. Because it's almost like you're going down a rabbit hole, isn't it? And you just think, wow, this hole just goes on for so long. I'm not sure if I want to try it. But instead, being curious and just saying, it's okay, I can't be perfect straight away. It's going back to what we were talking about before, being consciously clueless.
Yep.
You don't have to, there seems to be this need to choose between one and the other. Either I need to remain blissful in my cluelessness, or maybe I've just created it.
I love it.
Or you have to be completely 100% conscious. And it's like, you're never going to be 100% conscious. I think that's called nirvana. I think that happens to only a handful of us when we die. So it's not really something that is achievable for most of us. And we shouldn't be trying to use that as a stick to measure ourselves against, but instead being consciously clueless, just saying, I'm learning more every single day and I'm getting better every single day. And I'm going to die getting better. I'm never going to achieve perfection, but that's cool. As long as I'm on my way, that is surely better than just being completely clueless.
And that actually relieves some of the pressure.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, wait, I get to do the best I can.
Yeah. And I get to mess up and go, oops, that was wrong. I'll do better next time.
Exactly. And not quit because of the mess up, which I'm sure you've had people with publishing want to do that.
Oh, yeah. I've worked with people I had one lady who published a book with me this time last year, and she wrote a book by herself 20 years ago and hated it. She just about managed to do it and publish it. But she hated the process so much that she ended up hating a book, which meant that she didn't leverage it properly. She didn't market it. So what's the point?
Yep.
And then she spent 20 years knowing that she wanted to write a second book, but putting it off because of perfectionism. Oh, it's not going to be right. It's going to be hell like the first time. And then only when she found me, just let's just get this out of you and have a completely different viewpoint in that good is good enough. Let's just get what you know out. Yeah. And that relieves so much pressure for her as well.
Yeah. And it just feels nice to know that you can go into something. And if you've let go of perfection as the goal, turns out things can actually be fun.
Yeah. I remember reading somewhere, it's like, what would we do and who would we be if there was no such thing as failure? And it makes you think, doesn't it? If you just pretend there's no such thing as failure, but then just know it's going to happen, be like, it's okay to fail. Imagine the things that we would take a chance on if it was okay to fail, if we allowed ourselves to fail.
I like that. That does make you think about that question, or the things that I'm sure listeners, there's a few things coming up where you're like, oh, I've not tried that because I might fail.
Exactly.
Many aspects of our life. So you mentioned it before with sustainability and B Corp and vegan. Behind you, there is a vegan publisher sign. Let's talk a little bit about veganism and how that came into your life.
Again, came crashing into my life by accident. Like the story of my life, to be honest, Carly. Things just happen to me and I just go with it. I just say, okay, what does this mean? My family adopted a cat from our local shelter back in 2010. I'm going to be straight up with you, Carly. I didn't want her. I was just another family that had pets. We just didn't do that sort of thing. I just thought, oh my God, there's going to be fur everywhere. I was right. There was fur everywhere in places that you don't even understand how it gets to. Like you'll make a cup of tea and you'll find a fur floating. How did you even? The cat's nowhere even in the house. The cat's outside. How has this fur managed to get into my cup of tea?
It'll never go away.
I have no idea. Like it literally, it just gets everywhere. So I wasn't very happy, but I was vetoed. I was the only one that said no. Everyone else in my family were gung-ho for it. So I was like, okay. So this cat turns up, not really happy. And then within a few weeks, I just fell in love with her. But what really I think because I'd never been, we didn't have a family dog or a family cat growing up. So
It was new.
Yeah, I guess we easily thought of animals as quite dumb and they're not really sentient. They don't really know what's going on. And then just going down that rabbit hole of realizing we need to understand that. We need to believe that. Because if you actually believe that animals think the way we do, I mean, they may not have the higher levels of intelligence. They don't sit there thinking about God, for example, whether God exists, or they don't do that. But the basic things, such as the need to have family, the need to live a life, need to love their kids, need to have friendships, have a tribe, they have all of those things that we do. If we actually believe that, then we couldn't do all the awful things we did to them. The reason we are able to do the things we do to them is this belief that they don't really know what's going on. So then I carried on that thought process and I couldn't let it go. And I started to research levels of sentience in different animals. And then the horrifying reason, finding out that cats don't even make it into the top 10, I don't think. And we eat some of the more intelligent ones. Pigs are more intelligent than dogs, but we eat them. Octopus is very intelligent. We eat them. Rats are more intelligent than cats, but we test on them. But we eradicate them as vermin. But it just things that, and it made me go back into my past. And I grew up in a part of the UK in England, which is very white. So like London is very cosmopolitan. There's other cities like Manchester and Birmingham, very cosmopolitan. But where I grew up in Newcastle, when I was growing up, there was literally no other non-white family for about a 10-mile radius. So I grew up with just a sea of white faces, and I was made to feel different and that I didn't belong and judged straight away. And I started to draw parallels to that, how we segregate human beings into color and race and gender and sexual orientation and all of these things. And they're arbitrary. They're none of it actually, if you look into it, if you speak to a biologist, I do have a couple of biologist friends, they'll say it's all arbitrary. None of it, race doesn't even exist. Gender is a spectrum. It doesn't actually exist as male or female. If you speak to a biologist, they will tell you straight away, oh, it's all utter nonsense. Like it's
all words. It's all things we've made up.
Yeah, we've created these boxes and then we throw people into these boxes. And I start to draw parallels to that and what we do with animals. And it is my belief now that we will never, ever be able to get rid of racism and misogyny and homophobia and any of these things until we get rid of the way we box up animals. That's the building block. If we stop boxing up animals into pets, food, test subjects, hunting, if we stop doing that, then we start to dismantle the way we box up human beings as well. And we'll never be able to get rid of that if we don't do that at that bottom layer. So that's started. It took me, I'll be honest, it took me 2 years. I did that thing that most people do, was you get scared. What you said before about scared of even starting because it's so much. So you just think it'll be better if I just don't start at all. So I did stupid things for the first 2 years. I did things like, oh, I'll just go to humane farms.
And we all have to slowly go through those phases.
You got it.
We don't all have to. We don't all. A lot of people go overnight. But I also did the same thing where I'm like, okay, I can make better choices. And
I make more informed choices. I'll go to humane farms, or I won't eat animals, but I'll eat fish because obviously fish don't think and don't.
I did that. That was the last thing. That was the last thing I gave up. I'm also in a small town in like northern Minnesota in the States, right next to Canada. So it's like hunting, fishing is the lay of the land. So it was cultural too.
Yeah. A lot of it is. A lot of animal agriculture has seeped its talons into us in so many different ways that it is part of culture. And I think sometimes when it's hard, you have these awakenings, but then you have these barriers put up because people take it personally, especially coming from an Indian background. Food is a big thing for us. More so in the West, I tend to find that food is a big thing, but it tends to be in specific times of the year. So Thanksgiving or Christmas, food is a big thing. But the rest of the time, the West is more focused around alcohol. That tends to be
100%
the thing that brings people together. Whereas in Asian societies, and definitely in Indian society, it's not so much alcohol. It's more to do with food every day. So it's very difficult when you decide that you're going to go vegan, because like people feel like they don't realize that you're doing it for you. They almost feel like it's you're making a comment on them. Is no, and they feel rejected. I would see families feel rejected by me when I say, I can't eat this because this has got ghee in it, and that's clarified butter, and that comes from a cow, and it should have gone to its baby and not me. And they feel like it's, no, I'm not criticizing you, but that's how they feel. They take it as if you're, and it's tough. And I can see why some people just want to think about it, then they go, this is too hard.
Because I think there's a lot of those moments where we all have to learn this, right? Being a part of these systematic injustices, but we take it personally. Like someone says, oh, did you know what you just said actually is racist? It has racist undertones. And that person might know that from vernacular. That's not excusing racism, but I'm just saying there are these things where these are systematic things that have been ingrained in us. So you don't actually, that takes pressure off too. I think when you realize that you can make a difference and you can personally show up, but it's not your fault the animal agriculture industry exists and you rely on animal products. I'm not blaming my family for that, but if they're in that mindset still, people put their guards up.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just being mindful and making sure you get that across to them as well, because they don't know that. They don't know. I remember, I don't remember the exact words, but I remember reading somewhere that the easiest way to brainwash somebody is to make them feel like they made that choice. That's the best way to brainwash, to make people feel like they chose something when actually it wasn't a choice. I found this quite interesting. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, because I'm just thinking of all the people that argue, like all the triggered men on my Instagram and that want to tell me I'm going to die soon of osteoporosis, or I should eat a steak, I look like I'm dying, or whatever else lovely things people decide to say to me tomorrow, that they think they've chosen this way of eating, but they have not chosen that at all. They've actually never been forced to give it a second thought. That's so interesting.
Yeah. I remember reading somewhere that the average human being learns critical thinking from the age of 4 to 11, depending on the human being. When do you stop consuming animal products? Before the age of 4. Definitely milk you start drinking. You start drinking cow's milk, usually after you're weaned off your mother's milk. And then usually by the time you're 4 or 5, you're definitely eating solids. So your chances are you're eating chicken. So you are getting indoctrinated into something before you even learned to critically think. So it's not your fault at all. And it's getting that across to people as I'm not blaming you, and almost using yourself as saying, I was there myself. I always say that to anybody. It's just, I will never, ever judge you for not being vegan. I was non-vegan for longer than I've been vegan. I've been vegan coming up to 12 years, but I'm a 45-year-old woman. So you do the math there. Do you know what I mean? I've been non-vegan longer than I've been vegan. So who the hell am I to judge somebody? I always come from that place, and that usually softens them. Not always. Some people are just like already taken up a position. There's nothing you can do with those people, but just disentangle yourself from that.
Right.
But yeah, it's tough, but don't ever, I'm going to die trying to help people see that what they're doing is not only harmful to other beings and the planet, it's harmful to them. It's actually hurting them as well. But do it in a way that makes them feel like I'm not judging them, because I think it was a friend of mine that said, be the vegan that you would have wanted to meet when you weren't vegan. And that's what you should aim to be.
Yeah, that's really nice to put yourself in that position again. Sometimes listeners have heard me talk about this, definitely went through that quote unquote angry vegan phase, which I think is completely valid, because when you learn about systems of oppression, anger feels like the right response.
Yeah.
And that's okay as long as you don't get stuck in it, I think. But I definitely had that moment where I was like, holy shit, it's all connected. I was already a sociologist and social justice master's background. But I had not connected it to food. Yeah. And so all of a sudden I was like, guys, listen to me. I have figured it out. And when I'm telling people in my life what they should do, turns out they didn't.
Hey there, it's me. If you're digging this conversation so far around conscious living in this episode, and you're feeling inspired to make change, that's literally why I'm here. If you want sustainable ways to be sustainable, you hear eco-friendly or green and wonder if you're doing it right. You want to make your diet more earth-friendly by going vegan. You want to live a more connected life, but you're not even sure what that means. No judgment. It is possible to feel excited about making changes to make a difference in the world every single day with your choices, to go vegan and stay vegan without feeling like you're missing anything, or to learn how to make good choices for the planet without feeling stressed. I help folks who are ready to make changes in their life that support their health and the world around them through supportive coaching, practical education, and steps that make you enjoy the process. If that's you, email me at consciouslycarly@gmail.com and let's chat. Back to the episode.
Love that.
No, they don't, because it's, I heard a phrase recently. What was it called? Sunk cost fallacy. Have you heard of that? So this is a phenomenon that happens when, and you usually see it with people who've been conned. So what happens is, say they've been duped and someone's taken a load of money. They said there was like an investment, but there was no investment. They're just taking the money. But then what was interesting is when the police are following it up, they'll find out that person then's made a second or even a third payment to them. And they'll be like, why did you do that? When they're recounting and taking their story and writing it down, they'll say something like, yeah, I thought there was something weird after the first time because, so then like, why did you then carry on? But that's what they mean by sunk cost fallacy. It's a phenomenon. It's once someone is embedded into a strategy, even when there is evidence showing them that they're wrong, because they've already invested into it, they then go through this whole, I've already invested in it. So they have to make it right. And they have to force themselves to believe that this way is the right way, even when the evidence is showing them to the contrary. And like I said, what it tends to happen with people who've been conned, in that they'll be conned repeatedly by the same person. And they would have misgivings, and yet they're still paying this person because it's almost like it's too painful for them to think of the money that they've already lost. So therefore, they then throw good money over or through bad. And it makes no logical sense, but it's a phenomenon. It's called sunk cost fallacy. But I think this extends beyond just money and in terms of our thinking and our beliefs as well. If you're in your 30s, for example, and you spent your life, say you consider yourself a healthy person. So you've been like, I only eat white meat. I only eat fish. And all these things. And I eat eggs, but I only eat the whites. I never eat the yolk. You're doing all these healthy things.
And they're pasture raised, grass fed. And
grass fed and all that kind of stuff. And then someone comes along and says, actually, it's all, it doesn't matter how organic and fresh and grass fed and fair trade and all that stuff it is. Your body is actually, your intestines are designed like a herbivore. So basically, the best egg in the world is still going to cause problems for your intestines. Suddenly, all that belief, then that is 30 plus years of them being healthy, you're just poo-pooing that straight away.
Yeah.
That's going to make them go, no, go away. I don't want to listen to you. Let me just close my ears to what you're saying. That's going to make them react because now they have to think everything that they've done before was wrong.
Yeah.
And that's painful. So that's when you just want to go, no, even though the evidence is right there, I'm going to not listen to it. I'm going to carry on and do even more of the stuff that I was doing before. So it's something we come up against all the time, and understanding it will make you feel, certainly makes me feel better when I get that reaction from people. Instead of being like hurt or upset by it, I just go, oh, sunk cost fallacy. Okay, you're not ready. Let me just walk away from you right now because I can see this is painful for you. So I'm just going to walk away. And then maybe one day, when you're in a better place, we can talk again. But I'm kind to myself now because I realize that's what's happening. It's people have already, and I tend to find the older somebody is, the more likely they have this sunk cost fallacy because they've just been on the planet longer and been doing that thing for longer.
Yeah, that's wild. So you got into, I guess we can blame and thank the cat, right, for changing the trajectory of your lifestyle, your mindset, everything.
Completely.
And it sounds like it started with animals, but you also mentioned sustainability and you've mentioned health. So was it a domino effect for you then once you learned?
Yeah, I think it happens to all of us vegans. Really. You get into it. There tends to be three gateways, as I call them, either animal rights or to do with climate change, sustainability, or to do with health. It tends to be one of
It's all about me for my beginning. I was like, I need to feel better.
There you go. But then once you're in here, you get to meet others and you start to learn from others. I think I'm in a very good position being a publisher. I have people, it's like my job to learn about new things all the time because I'm learning vicariously through my clients who are writing books. So I end up learning about their subject really well. So certainly being a publisher has fast-tracked me in my understanding of what is ethical, what is sustainable, what is truly plant-based, that sort of thing. So yeah, and I would say it's interesting when people ask me, it's like, why are you vegan? And originally I would say vegan for the animals, but I would now say vegan for humans, because I now can make the link between the way we box up animals, like I said, and the correlation to racism and misogyny and homophobia and all the isms that we don't like and the way we treat people. I found it really interesting and painful to see a tweet from one of the Israelis a couple of weeks ago, so talking about Hamas as animals. And I remember thinking, even animals shouldn't be treated that way.
Wow.
But people, I think of how a lot of cultures use the word animal as a derogatory term for a human. They say, oh, that guy's an absolute dog. Oh, they were fighting like animals. That's the lowest. Obviously, these beings don't mean anything.
Decades to refer to the masses of people that are being erased by genocide as animals. And
I'm thinking we shouldn't even be treating animals like that. Never mind treating human beings as animals like that. So that's my belief, that we need to really change how we treat animals, because only then will we change the way we treat each other. It's as simple as that. So I would say I'm vegan for the humans rather than the animals, because we're never going to be able to get on with each other unless we become vegan. It's as simple as that.
I love that.
I'm working with an awesome lady at the moment in Texas. She's Renee. She is the world's first cattle ranch to animal sanctuary transition in Texas. She's based in Texas. She does incredible work. She has an amazing nonprofit. And she bridges the gap between cattle, because there's issues. I mean, a lot of vegans get very angry. Understandable, we've all been there, but then some of them take it too far, and it's just become an instant. They start boxing people up. So, for example, all cattle ranchers are bad, instead of thinking them of these people who've been born into usually generations of cattle ranchers. It's all they know. This is how they make money off the land. There is no other way for them to make money from this land. So they're basically stuck. And having someone like Renee, who's an ex-cattle rancher, she bridges that gap, and she tells me stories, and her book is all about her transition and what happened, but also the fact that all these cattle ranchers come to her and say, we would love to leave this business, but we can't. What are we going to do? They get so many subsidies from the American government, which means this is their living. There is no money to get them to transition into anything else. Right. They would love to, and they hear about, this farm basically got this amazing grant and they've transitioned into mushroom farming. But that's 1 in a million chance. So they're basically some great big impact investor decided to make a showcase of a farm and help them transition into mushroom farming. That's not going to happen on any kind of scale. The average cattle rancher can't suddenly go, let's just do a mushroom farm now. Instead of, let's sell all of our cows and get into mushroom farming.
The American government is not giving subsidies to mushroom farming, I can tell you that.
They're not doing any subsidies at all to transition any farms at all. They want people to stay in this. I remember, wasn't this about 2 years ago? There was I think about 18,000 cows were blown up accidentally in Texas, in Dimmitt. That's where it's Dimmitt, in Dimmitt, Texas. If anyone wants to Google this, put in Dimmitt, Texas cows, and you'll find it horrific, especially if you're vegan. Don't look at the videos and the images, just read if you want to keep your sanity. But basically what happened, and this I found out from Renee, and she talks about this in her book, is there was this cattle ranch. There was about 18,000 cows in one place. Straight away wrong, 18,000 cows, lots of cows.
I can't even wrap my head around it sometimes.
I can't even. There's more cows. There were more cows than there are people living in Dimmitt, Texas. That gives you an idea. They were all in this one place, under one roof. And there's this machine that goes around scooping up all of the cow poop. Because obviously when you put 18,000 cows into one place, there's going to be a lot of cow poop. Yes. So basically it's too much for a human being to go around scooping up the poop. So basically it's a machine.
Yeah. It's too much for a human to do.
Straight away. So you basically got a machine that's going around scooping up this poop. It basically overheated. It was too much poop for it to scoop. it blew up and killed all the cows. Guess what the American government did to the farmer? Gave them a ton of money to buy more cows and set them up again, with exactly the same thing to happen again. I mean, it's just horrible, isn't it? Thinking of those poor cows killed by their own poop, basically.
Yeah, killed by
their own poop. And so that's the reality that these cattle ranchers. Now some vegans will blame that cattle rancher. They'll be like, "Oh my God, they're going to set it up again, and the same thing's going to happen again." What is that cattle rancher meant to do?
Yeah.
Like, what is that cattle rancher meant to do? I mean, they're not going to get any money to transition into doing something else.
Right.
They're stuck into it. So she's amazing, and she's basically the bridge between the farming community and veganism and animal rights and that sort of thing. So I do feel very lucky because I'm working with these people, and then I learn their stories vicariously through their books. Mm-hmm. And so I think, but yeah, I say I'm vegan for humans. I'm vegan for farmers, even the farmers inside animal agriculture. Because if you actually spoke to farmers inside animal agriculture, if you tell them straight away you're a vegan, they're going to straight away be like hostile towards you. But if they don't know you're vegan, and sometimes I can speak to them without them knowing I'm vegan, you'll be amazed how many of them actually open and say, I'd love to get out of this. I'd love to do something different. I don't want to do this. This is hard work, and they don't actually get paid all that much, but they're stuck in it. This is what they do. They don't know anything else. It's now going to cost them a lot of money to retrain and find a new career. Some of them are well into their 40s, 50s, 60s. It's not now their time to do it. Renee tells me there's cattle ranchers now who are in despair because the next generation, their children, don't want to do it because they've gone off to university. Some of them are now vegan or vegetarian. They definitely don't want a cattle ranch. And they're like, I don't know what to do with what am I going to do with all this land and all my cows? What am I going to do with it? And they're stuck. And there's nothing they can do, but they get no sympathy from animal activists or vegans or anything like that. Yeah, I would say now I'm vegan for humans, more so even than animals. Love animals to death.
Right.
But I would say I'm vegan for humans now.
I can't wait to read that book, first of all, and hope to connect with Renee in the future, because that sounds incredible. And I love that what you're pointing out, at least to me, seems like the reminder that it takes individual change plus systematic change.
Yeah. And ganging up together. Stop seeing other people as the enemy. Farmers are not the enemy. They're stuck in that system as well. Okay, the enemy is the government that they put in place that trap people, whether they're trapping farmers into carrying on and not being able to leave animal agriculture, whether they're trapping the average human being, as I said before, who don't even start critically thinking until at the earliest at the age of 4, and indoctrinating them into eating things before they can critically think about what they're eating. It's a system that's preying on all of these people.
Right.
And what they don't want, and what they do very well, is keeping us separated, because if we all work together, they'd be screwed. That's what it is. So they work very hard at keeping us separated.
Yes, it's so true, because I've shared this story before on here, but I joined a few, Lord help me, Facebook groups about different vegan ones when I was like, I should be promoting my podcast in some of these groups that pop up. So most of them are fine. One of them I got kicked out of like pretty immediately.
Oh, what did you do?
You have to answer a question when you get in, one or two. And one of them was like, I'm paraphrasing, would you buy animal products for a family member, or would you buy something? And my mom, the example was right in front of me. My mom had a cold, and she had asked for, I don't know, something, a pizza, or it's like a comfort food that she wanted that I was going to buy for her because she was sick. And that's a choice I made. I do what I can to only buy vegan stuff when I do like what I can, but I made a choice that day that she needed something, she didn't feel good. And so I said, yeah, I think once in a while, if I'm caring for someone and they need nutrients, now's not the time for me to give them the speech. And
not only is that not the time to give them a speech, it means in future they're not going to listen to you, because they're going to see you as someone who's unsympathetic, someone who didn't listen to them, who was pushing your agenda instead of so you're hampering your chances of speaking to them in the future as well.
I got this long response from one of the admins about why I shouldn't be in the group. and about how I don't practice what I preach and that I'm basically going to hell. And I was just like, cool. So don't we have the same goal?
Yeah, exactly. And they don't realize that they're not really helping matters at all. That they perpetuate that kind of vegan that non-vegans don't want to meet and get upset by straight away. And they perpetuate that and make it difficult for the rest of us who are trying to bridge that gap and talk to people. And they don't realize they're doing it.
Yeah. I so appreciate this conversation because it is such a good reminder. I think, we're recording this in November of 2023. There's a lot happening. There's always a lot happening in our world, but specifically right now, the conversation about vegan for for humans and for oppression is just more and more on my brain. And I've been thinking and brainstorming about how to bring that into my content more. Yeah. Because it is what I truly believe. And I've worked with a business coach and have realized, I've been a little nervous to scare certain people off, but it's also the reminder of those aren't the people that are ready to listen or work with you.
Exactly. And it's amazing how you can say quite tough stuff, but if you say it in a way that doesn't make a person feel that they're at fault,
right?
You can say quite tough stuff and people will be amazed how people will listen to you.
Right.
If you always make sure that person, you say things like, I was there as well. I know what this feels like. I did this. If you always talk in terms of things that you've done wrong unwittingly, then you'll be amazed people are much softer because they realize they're not being blamed. So yeah, I think you can actually go quite, you can do. I remember having a conversation, this is a number of years ago, with a neighbor of mine who she's passed away now, but back then she was in her late 80s. Okay. So she was getting on. And she would always call me and my family. We were on one corner and she's on another corner. And she always calls us the nice little coloured family. Now, that was a term back then was acceptable, but it's not a term that you would use now in the UK or in the US. It means a completely different thing in South Africa, by the way, and it can be used.
Yeah.
It means a different thing in South Africa, but certainly in the UK and the US, coloured is not something you would use. So I remember somebody overhearing and getting really upset at this lady, and then getting upset at me because I stuck up for this lady. I was like, look, she doesn't know, okay? And then this person felt upset because they'd stuck up for me, but the point, and then I explained to them, okay, so maybe it's my fault that I've not corrected you, but I was worried about whether you would get upset by being corrected. But it's not a term that we use anymore because coloured implies that people are actually white at one stage and some people got coloured in or something like that. It's more likely the other way around. It's more likely that Africa was our birthplace. So if anything, people went out and got whiter as opposed
people
to
got whiter.
That kind of makes more sense, really. And she was like, oh my God, I had no idea. Do you know what I mean? When you make people feel like they're not at fault, it's like your generation, that is the word you used for people who are not white. So there's nothing wrong with that. And when you come out, it's amazing how people go, and then they're willing to actually make some changes and go, oh, okay, now I know. Whereas what that lady was, bless her, she was trying to stick up for me. This was another neighbor, but she came at it in a very accusatory way. And thank God I stopped her. First of all, because this lady's elderly, so I didn't want her upset. And secondly, what probably would have happened, she probably would have dug her heels in then and said, oh, Mitali's never had a problem with me calling her that, so why are you sticking your nose in?
Right.
Can you see what I mean? And then you take up a position. So it's all about how you broach things with people. I know it's hard. I sometimes lose it. Some people are just very annoying, aren't they? And it's easy to lose it with them.
We're human.
Yeah, we're all human. We all sometimes go, oh my God, you've got such a punchable face. I'm going to punch you with my words. Do you know what I mean? We've all been there. We know what it feels like. Yeah. But try as much as you can to take a few breaths and just go, okay, this person doesn't know what they're doing. Because I mean, maybe I'm being naive here, Carly, but I do inherently believe that people are not born evil. We don't really set about to hurt people. We just do things unwittingly, and we just create this huge amount of collateral damage without even realizing because of the systems that we're born into.
Yep. I so appreciate being able to talk about these things and say, yeah, it's frustrating. And also say there are ways to have these conversations. Again, it's not the either or. They will, sometimes these conversations are hard, but just because they're hard or might be challenging or you need to learn doesn't mean to avoid them altogether.
Exactly. There's a really good, do you watch The Good Place?
I did.
It's one of my favorite TV shows of the last decade. I absolutely adored it. I've always said that if I ever get the chance to get back into education and do a degree, I'd do a degree in philosophy. And watching The Good Place made me feel like I had a degree in philosophy. I learned so much about all the different philosophers and what their thoughts on. I was like, damn, if I ever do this degree, I'll have a head start.
Notes.
I did actually. I was like, it's an entertainment show, it's a comedy, and yet I was making notes on my phone. I was like, I need to look up this philosopher.
Yes,
I loved it. But there was one episode, I forget the name of the episode, it was by far my most favorite episode. I think it was in the second or third series. It wasn't in the first one. And it was about, they'd figured out, so this is where they'd figured out that no one was going to heaven and hadn't gone to heaven for about 300 or 400 years. And they're like, hang on a minute, how can that be? Before that, they have this, you've seen the program, you know what I'm talking about. But for people who are listening to this, who maybe haven't watched it, basically this lady ends up where she thinks she's in heaven. So she dies, shopping trolley accident, I believe it was, death by shopping trolley. And she ends up in what she believes is in heaven, but then she realizes she should be in hell, and basically she's accidentally taken somebody else's place who has the same name as her, but she doesn't want to go to hell, so she now conspires to stay in heaven. I'm not going to spoil the rest of it because it's brilliant. If you haven't watched it and you love comedy but with a philosophical bent and intelligence bent, go and watch The Good Place, one of my favorite programs of the last 10 years. But in this one particular episode, they figured out that no one's going to heaven for about 400 or 500 years. And I thought before that, there'll be people, basically it was a point system, and you lived your life. And then depending on how many points you got, you would either end up going to heaven or you end up going to hell. There you go. And then up until about 400 or 500 years ago, there were people going to heaven and people going to hell, which is how it should be. But then around about 400 or so years ago, it stopped and everyone now was going to hell. And the question was, why? What's going on? Are you telling me everyone just went evil 400 years ago? That can't happen. So what's happening? And they realized that what happened was 400 years ago, guess what you had? The industrial age. And when the industrial age happened, basically we stopped just living off the land and we started assigning ourselves jobs. So people did certain things and they didn't see what was going on elsewhere. And there was this beautiful story of, and basically they worked it out, that there was this boy 400 years ago who, just before 400 years ago, he was going to his grandma who was ill and he wanted to get her some flowers. So basically what he did is he went to the fields, picked up some flowers, went and gave it to his mother, and then ended up getting 5 good points to go to heaven because he did this amazing thing. And then juxtaposed that story with somebody now, again, a young boy was going to visit his grandmother, and his grandmother is ill. So he goes and wants to get some flowers, but you can't now just go and get flowers because now it's trespassing, because if you pick flowers up in a national park, you can't do that. So he goes to a florist and he buys a bunch of flowers. And then he goes and gives these flowers to his grandmother. Pretty much almost identical story to what happened 400 or 500 years ago. But now he's got 5 negative points and he's going to hell. And basically worked out because these flowers were picked by an immigrant worker that wasn't paid enough. It was flown halfway across the world. So it had a carbon imprint that he didn't know about. And because of that, he's now going to hell. He got 5 minus points because and then this boy who did the exact same thing a few centuries ago got plus points to go into heaven. And I thought that was my favorite episode, because that kind of, in that 20 minute episode, explains where we are as human beings right now, in that we're unwittingly causing so many terrible things to happen on this planet, and we don't even know about it. We're literally just going about our lives, buying things, consuming things, and we don't know. So if you come from that viewpoint, not only does it make you feel better about humanity and realize that we're just not all evil, but also you can approach non-vegans with a sense of empathy, in that sense of not what you do. And even as vegans, we're doing things that we don't even realize it. Right now, we're doing things that's causing a negative impact somewhere and we don't realize. And we've got to be kind to ourselves and to others.
Yes. I love that. I love that example too.
I'm going to go and watch that episode again now. It's my favorite episode. I love it.
Gonna start rewatching The Good Place tonight. Is there anything else you want to share with listeners?
If you are interested in writing a book, I mainly work with people who do have a big mission to get out there. I mean, the big thing I would say is if I don't work with people who want to write a book because it's on their bucket list.
Right.
Okay. It tends to be very egotistical. It's all about, I want to talk about me. That's not what it's about. I work with people who have a genuine mission out there. So someone like Renee, who really wants to get this, she wants to create legislative change in the US. First of all, she wants to stop the ridiculous subsidies that the American government give animal agriculture. That needs to stop. And then there needs to be funding regarding transitioning the farmers who want to transition out of that lifestyle. And she wants to, that's why she's writing a book. And it looks like, if we play our cards right, she's in touch with Kip Anderson. So hopefully her book will be turned into a documentary as well, which puts a lot of pressure on me to make sure we get this book done right. But yeah, people who have a true, whether it's plant-based health, maybe I'm just working with a lady at the moment who's figured out a link between the issues that women face at menopause and animal products. Yeah. So she really wants to help women understand that if you can't eliminate, if you just reduce your animal products, that's going to have an amazing effect on your menopausal symptoms and how you feel. So anyone like that, anyone has a mission that really needs to get other people to understand, whether it helps them, helps other humans, helps non-human beings, helps the planet as a whole, get in touch, and I'd love to help you write a book.
Perfect. All your information will be there so people can look you up, look what you're all about. I know they're going to want to. This conversation was just perfect, honestly. I so appreciate your perspective.
And thank you. I've enjoyed this. It's been a good chat, and I'm going to go and start rewatching
If you're hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode of Consciously Clueless. And for that, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this new episode, and if you did, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or tag me and share in social media. Share this episode with others who may be interested in this topic. To get more resources, influence on topics covered, and bonus content, join the Consciously Clueless community over on Patreon at patreon.com/consciouslycarly. And don't forget, if you need help living more consciously, let's work together. Email me today. See you next Wednesday for a new episode.